So we're going to pick up from where we left off yesterday. It was a great session. We had a lot of interaction. We were sort of talking at a fairly philosophical level around road safety and safe system and thinking how we're progressing things. As I mentioned, it's important we did that just to ensure that we're all on the same page with that. It also sort of solidifies a little bit about why we need safe system assessments, as opposed to just traditional run-of-the-mill style, road safety checks and things like that. It has a specific framework under which we are assessing projects or existing bits of road. So leads us in nicely. We talked about the general philosophy of road safety. We delved into some of the behavioral stuff, and I'll link that back in module 5, or Max will, in terms of how in a safe system assessment we might think a little bit about some of that. It's not a huge part of common safe system assessments, but it is a possible thing we can integrate and think about. We talked a little bit about their enforcement. We talked about the vehicles and vehicle safety features. We talked about speed and the importance of speed and speed management, and how speed and the biomechanics of injury, kinetic energy, are so interlinked and so important to each other. And we finished off briefly just talking about exposure, likelihood, and severity, and that's where I'll sort of be picking things up from. So recording this session as well. So this session we're going to delve a bit further into this sort of idea of kinetic energy management at intersections and at mid-blocks. And we're going to really focus in there on those two intersection types. Now, admittedly, I'm going to, for this session, be a little more focused on vehicle-to-vehicle crash types, or vehicle-to roadside hazard crashes. The next session we've got, and Max will be taking you through it, drills down into vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, and then goes through some of the safe system principles at intersections and mid-blocks for vulnerable road users. So I'm going to start with a little bit more focus on vehicle-to-vehicle stuff for a number of reasons, but we'll just jump into it. Of course, don't forget to count your Wallies. Wally is back. You may have just seen him. So I'm going to talk about intersections first, and I'm going to get you shortly to do a little bit of thinking around an intersection example that I'm going to give you. But intersections they're an increased crash risk point on our road network. Now, that might seem pretty obvious to most people because of the conflict points that occur, and you can see a crash at this intersection happening. And that's often what people have in their mind associated with an intersection crash. And they certainly do occur. They occur in different sort of forms. But some other things just to remember around intersections is that it is a place where pedestrians need to cross, cyclists need to cross. So those conflict points are, increased for other road users as well. But also at an intersection, there is an increased turbulence associated with vehicles avoiding an errant vehicle, a vehicle that's entered into the intersection incorrectly or at the wrong time or the like, and the other vehicle will avoid that. So they may not hit it, or they may clip it, and then we see vehicles leaving the road at intersections. So we see an increase in runoff road crash likelihood at intersections due to that potential or that turbulence that can occur. And a lot of the time around an intersection, that's a point where we actually physically place point source hazards. So it could be things like signal pedestals and a standard type 2B signal pedestal is not frangible, so that will a lot of that energy will go into a vehicle. and strong enough to cause serious injuries and fatal injuries. We often have power poles at intersections because we are having to, turn a power line down another side road. We have culverts for, getting water under the road. So you've got this kind of potent mix where you've got increased chance that a vehicle is going to leave the road, plus a whole lot of things that are going to make it more severe in terms of a crash. And what you'll see is using any sort of network risk tool, and there are lots available, if you sort of graph that along a route, so if you've sort of got chainage on the x-axis and you've got risk level on the y-axis, you'll see that, your mid-block sections will bubble along at some risk level. And then each time we hit an intersection, it just spikes like that. And, there'll be some characteristics of the intersection that make them higher and not so high, but they'll just spike like that. Now, it's not to say that there's not, underlying risk, and there certainly is, but it jumps up there because of the conflict points, because of the increased turbulence, so more chance of leaving the road and hazards around the intersection. So we need to start to really understand how we can manage those risk spikes to get them significantly down. Now, Monash University Accident Research Centre came up with some high-level principles on intersection design from a safe system perspective. Now, I wanted to put these in here. I mean, they're very generic, but they provide us with a little bit of interesting thinking around that exposure, likelihood, and severity that I talked about. So you can see that the first two there, fewer vehicles and fewer intersections. So the bulk of our lives, we're not in a position where we're able to, significantly influence this, but it is a really good starting point to think about. They influence the exposure to crashes. So remember we were talking about exposure times likelihood times severity as our way to analyze risk under a safe system assessment. If we can reduce the number of vehicles going through an area, we've reduced the exposure to crashes. And if you can eliminate intersections, you've eliminated exposure to intersection crashes, okay? There might be other crash types still available, but intersection crashes, you've removed. There is no intersection. Then you start to look into conflict points and can we reduce conflict points? Can we block a certain turn? Can we make it left in, left out? These sort of things. You've still got an intersection there, but you've started to address some of those conflict points. And that's going to influence the likelihood of crash. Then we're talking about, okay, what is left there? We want to think about the speed of vehicles and the angle of vehicles. This is when we're talking about vehicle-to-vehicle crashes, speeds and angles, and bring those back to biomechanical tolerances. So we talked about this last time. We had those graphs, but we're talking somewhere around that 50 kilometers per hour for a right angle crash, a T-bone style crash. Somewhere a little bit above that when you can get a bit more angle on it. Now, that goes back to your year 10 physics and vectors. If you cast your mind back, like if you've got that, you get some energy pushed out into the environment. If you have that, more energy is pushed out into the environment. So you kind of bounce off a little bit, if that makes sense. Now, head on, you don't get that. In fact, it's worse from that vector's perspective. But what happens is the frontal crash protection of the vehicle is engaging. And the front of a vehicle is far better engineered for crashes than the sides of vehicles. We have crumple zones, airbags, seat belts, all acting in the frontal energy absorption. Our mechanical engineering colleagues, in vehicle design were way ahead of us at an infrastructure perspective in terms of managing energy in crashes. I mean, all of those things I mentioned, crumple zones, seatbelts, airbags, are all, energy management features, which were, came in very early. That was, if they'd taken a very sort of road design philosophy into vehicle design, there wouldn't be any of that. There'd just be more things to try and stop the crash happening in the first place. I think, there's lots more that can be done to try and stop the crash in the first place, and we need to continue that. But we need to, in the infrastructure space, get our head a bit more in the energy management perspective. Anyway, so that's why we can get a little bit more speed out of these two when we get a little bit more angle on these crashes. Anytime we've got those pedestrian cyclists crossing at these locations, we should be looking to get speeds at these down to these 30 kilometers per hour, or alter the planning and the like to eliminate that that need for crossing or separate that crossing. When we're above these speeds and angles, we're not meeting our safe system objectives. So we need to start to rethink how we manage that whole area. Now, okay, that's a little bit high level for us. We need to probably get into some specifics. I've put this table in again. And you can derive this from those graphs that I showed you, but it makes it kind of nice and clear. Generally, vehicle-to-vehicle crashes, anything crashing around 40 kilometers an hour is okay from a biomechanics of injury level. Of course, we don't want that to happen. And if you can make it so that's very unlikely, that's great. But if it happens around that, we generally see survivability even up to that 50 on the 90. 60 on those other angles. Now, that's from ChemX, which is the kinetic energy management model. It's a program you can use to determine kinetic energy in different environments. Now, that is far more sophisticated than you need for a safe system assessment. For a safe system assessment, we can use generically these sort of ideas and we can quantify things. It's not that absolute precision tool we're trying to get to. Head-ons and rear ends, there's a bit of work happening over in Adelaide to try and get us some more understanding of rear end crashes and speeds and weights of vehicles and those sort of things. At the moment, we sort of just say rear end somewhere with the head on. You could probably rear end a little bit more than that if vehicles are able to move forward. And then 80 kilometers an hour, we say not feasible. That's the key here, though, is it's delta V. Now, what I mean by delta V is it's change in velocity. So you can operate an intersection at higher speed than 80 kilometers an hour, as long as you've done things like accelerate one vehicle. So if you've accelerated a vehicle and there's another vehicle there and they crash, well, this one could be going at 200 kilometers an hour and this one going at 180, and the crash, the delta V is there at 20, and the transfer of energy in that crash is okay. Okay, certainly, there's going to be challenges with runoff road and all of that there, but from that initial transfer of energy, we're in the delta V range. So, there is possibility to operate intersections at higher speeds than this. But those set us a nice sort of parameter in terms of, what are we generally thinking is possible? So in a safe system assessment, you might be given a new intersection to have a look at. They're planning a new intersection, and you're going to think about what angles crashes could happen at. Now, this is far more precise, again, than you would need to be in a safe system assessment, but in CAD, that's very easy to just spit out. But like really what I would be thinking is, okay, new intersection here, I'd go, okay, the vehicle coming out here and that bullet vehicle there, well, that's pretty close to a 90-degree crash. And we've just looked at the speeds on that. So that's somewhere around the 50 kilometers per hour that we're thinking is a threshold speed. Then I go over here and they go, okay, they get out there now and they made that turn. We've got more angle on that. So that one I'm going to sort of put to about a 60 kilometer per hour threshold speed. So you're starting to match now angles to speeds and getting an understanding of what's generally, what we would call a threshold speed. We talked about secondary crashes or where vehicles sort of clip other vehicles, end up in the roadside. A lot of the graphs and the numbers we give you is on this hypothetical, square crash like you see here. That's not something that occurs that often. It does occur. There's a lot of reaction from that bullet vehicle a lot of the time, and they're trying to avoid, and they go off in all sorts of crazy places. And the combination of vehicles, often they both vehicles will go into the roadside in different areas, sometimes a bit as a group, but some research around that sort of showed where vehicles colliding. So as thousands of intersection crashes all then replotted onto this axis with vehicle, and where the secondary death and serious injury crashes were occurring. I mean, I'm not sure the study was needed to tell us it's likely to be in that little quadrant. That's a kind of obvious thing, I would hope, to most people. But you do get some others with clip off and spinning out and some different places and distances off. Just something to think about as we think about a intersection and roadside environment as well. Okay, I think it's time to get you doing something for Tuesday morning. So what I'm going to do is give you this intersection to have a look at and have a think about how we can alter it to improve safe system alignment. And get us as close as we can to the elimination of death and serious injury at this location going forward. So this intersection, we've got a major road, we've got a highway, and it is 70 kilometers per hour. It's a B-double route. It's carries about 22,000 vehicles a day, of which about 11% are heavy vehicles or commercial vehicles. So it's, decent volume road ticking along. This side road here, well, that's like a local collector road. Its speed limit is 50 kilometers per hour. Carries about 2,500 vehicles a day. So it's got some volume there. There is like a school down the road here, about 400 meters or so. We've got a bus stop here. This is all residential. This is like a drain culvert, like a culvert structure, so water will go in there and then comes out there into this sort of flood basin area. You got a bit of a pedestrian crossing, bit of a Danish offset crossing here. Danish offset crossings where you walk into the middle and cross. Now, random little fact here, that's backwards, that Danish offset crossing, because you'd want it to actually, you want to make vehicles face oncoming traffic. Like, I wouldn't say this is a major safe system assessment thing that you would point out, but you'd actually want to make that, if you could, go like that. because then any pedestrian walking in there is facing oncoming traffic. It's like, I explain this a bit more in the road safety audit course I do, but I run, that if you walk up to a railway level crossing, the designer of the crossing will make you look both ways down the track without you really knowing that you're looking both ways down the track. And that's because they will walk you in to an area. They'll make you walk along, looking up one way, then they'll make you turn, and then they'll make you walk along looking the other way. And it's a nice, neat design, safety trick that's used. Anyway, so same principle for Danish offset crossings, or Z crossings, some people call them. But this one's the wrong way, so it doesn't give us that advantage. But as I say, to me, it's not a major issue. It's just something, it's a note to think about. It's the kind of thing I'd pick up much more often, road safety auditing and a safe system assessment. I would definitely note it, but it's not going to majorly change the end outcome of what we've got here. Anyway, sorry, I digress. What else have we got here? This is a shared user path. This is a service road, so it's two-way service road, and it's just providing access to the residential houses. And there are access points into it further down here and further up there. Oh, what did I do? I turned subtitles on. Okay. What else can I tell you about this area? Oh, up the road about maybe 500 meters, set of traffic signals. Down the road about another kilometer, there's a set of traffic signals. So I'll show you just from the street view, and then I'm going to get you to do some thinking around this. So there you go. You can see the intersection. You can see there's a bus stop over there. It's got lighting. You can see the service roads here. It's got a bit of a shoulder being used as a bike lane as well. It's got turn facilities. Jump to the other view there. So there you can see the drainage structure thing, and that area, shared user path over here connects in. So our aim here is to spend some money on this intersection to make it highly safe system aligned. And I'm going to give you a few constraints here, because I'll make it a little more real world. I'm going to give you, you can have 4 million. I like you. Let's have $4 million. You can't close the intersection. So vehicles need to be able to go north. We'll say north is up the page. North and south coming out, and they need to be able to get in coming from the north and the south as well. You are operating in your current organizational and political framework. So whatever, you say we can't, well, if you propose something, extreme, highly radical, I want a bit of an idea of how you're actually going to get that approved and actually built. And the one last thing I'm going to get you to do is anything you suggest, I want you to start practicing this exposure, likelihood, and severity. So if you were to say something like, okay, improve the lighting at the intersection, which would be a weird thing because I didn't say anything about, whether it's how it's lit and night and the like, but, improve the lighting. Okay, you'd say that is going to influence the likelihood of crash. So you just put a little L in brackets. Lighting will help people see pedestrians crossing or vehicles coming out and the like, and it lessens the chance that a crash occurs. But, speed of vehicles will stay the same, angles will stay the same, severity is going to stay the same. Sure, there might be one or two crashes where, they saw something a little earlier, so they managed to break a bit and there was less severe, but we still have that possibility of the high severity crash sitting there. Now, one other thing is that some of you might go, well, I don't know actually how much stuff costs. So I'm going to find this exercise a little bit hard. Now, I will be like an instant cost estimator tool. So if you need a cost estimate on something, just type it into the chat and say cost. So if you're saying like grade separation, so that's like a flyover cost, I'd say $48 million. And so outside your budget. Okay, so hopefully the task's clear. Just to summarize that again, you got $4 million. You can't close off the intersection. You can make whatever other changes you want, as long as you can sort of see some sort of pathway to actually getting that in your current organizational or political framework or whatever it is. If you work for a local government, how would you navigate this through the approval process? If you're a consultant, how would you help one of your clients navigate this through? If you're state government, how would you sort of get this through? And then for each thing you suggest, give us an idea of whether you think that's going to influence the exposure to crashes, the likelihood of crashes, or the severity of crashes, or maybe a combination could influence them. That's really going to be where we're going to build from. I need everybody by the end of this session to start to have a bit more clarity in their mind about what exposure, what things influence the exposure to crashes, and the likelihood of crashes and the severity of crashes. So I'm going to give you a good 7 minutes to have a ponder of this. So if you jot a few ideas in there, and you might have time for a stretch as well. But if you need any cost estimation, let me know. And of course, if you've got any questions about this intersection, I'm happy to answer them as well. So pop them into the chat. So off you go. Have a bit of a think about it. Communicate via the chat. I shall leave you to it. I'll give it another minute or so. Seen some great stuff coming in. Loving the people putting the exposure or likelihood or severity comments. So thank you. All right, put your final thoughts in, then we'll have a bit of a chat about it. Okay, we're getting into some detailed specifics here. Okay, remember we've got to keep movements open. That was one of our conditions. Okay, I'm going to start talking through some of these answers we're seeing. First of all, well done. Thank you. Really good set of ideas coming in. Nice thinking around exposure and likelihood and severity. And you've actually, you're proving you've got a good grasp of this concept already, which is good. It usually takes me a lot longer to get people's head around, but I will just clarify a few things as we go. Okay, so some ideas we had come in there, and a lot of you have, shared them with everybody in the chat, so that's nice. So lots of people will be able to see that. So we've got the idea of sort of latching onto that school zone, making a remote school crossing speed zone, so reducing speed during school times, which will be a time of more activity. I think that's it's a nice, nice utilization of something that is actually going to fit nicely within political frameworks. It's very hard to argue against slowing people down around school times. So Mahesh, there a prize for that idea, and that'll certainly improve things during that time period. We've got to think about other time periods as well. That will reduce the severity of any incident that occurs. It will also reduce the likelihood as well. So getting speeds down gives more opportunity to avoid crashes and also reduces the severity of any that do occur. So investigate possibility to reduce exposure by diverting some traffic up and down to different signals through one form or another. So that's Adam's suggestion there. I really I like that for one from one perspective, in the sense of understanding what exposure is, because that's exactly right. Like if you lessen the number of vehicles, that you've down the exposure, right? So prize for getting that one right. And I like the idea to investigate and look what could be done in that sense. So then we had some people jumping in on the idea of signalizing this intersection. There was some people popping in, scratching around, thinking about how much a roundabout would cost, which is going to cost a lot and well over our budget for something that would be able to generally conform with the Austrade's Guide to Road Design, Part 4B, which is a roundabout one. Due to the fact that we've got those larger vehicles, multi-lane, it would be very large. Now, does it need to be that large? We might have a chat about that later. But then people started jumping into this idea of traffic signals. Now, signalizing an intersection reduces the likelihood of crash. I ended last session with that as one of the examples. We define it as a likelihood reducer only. Okay, it doesn't change the exposure to crashes because the same number of vehicles are going through the intersection. Yes, we're telling them to stop at different times, but the idea of signalizing doesn't influence the exposure to crash, and it doesn't influence the severity of crash in its native form, just a set of traffic signals. The reason for that is that there's nothing there to slow a bullet vehicle through. So a vehicle coming up here facing a green light, for example, that they will continue at their speed. Why would they slow down? And if a vehicle, came through here, jumped a red light, made a bad turn call through the signals or the like, the crash would happen at the same severity. So that's how you get to that. Now, as I said before, there'll be some circumstances and some crashes will occur where a vehicle will have slowed because it's, the light's changing or something like that, and the crash will be less severe. But we are thinking about those ones that can still occur in that normal operating envelope. So then a few people started to say, well, maybe we could then do something to that bullet vehicle and, slow it down somehow. And we had different ideas. We had people wanting to do speed limit reviews on this road, see if we could slow that bullet vehicle down a bit. We had people thinking about raising the intersection itself or making raised safety platforms. So the idea, platform on that approach. Again, we had people really hoping that they could maybe afford a roundabout, but didn't seem to get there. Then we got into some more, I suppose, elaborate or more detailed descriptions in there. Some great stuff from Darren in there, sort of trying to dig into some of that. So people got interested in these culverts and can we provide barrier systems along here to protect road users from dropping into the culvert, and that would reduce the severity of the crash, okay? So hitting a barrier system is a crash. It is just far less severe than dropping into a culvert and abruptly stopping. So that's why we say it reduces the severity of run-off road crashes. Okay, so Madge has come up with an interesting one to discuss a seagull, and certainly showing your Western Australianness with a seagull crossing, as you said there. Seagulls, well, New South Wales does like a seagull as well. I'll explain what a seagull is for those who aren't sort of familiar with it. The idea being that you would sort of provide it kind of looks like a seagull. That's why it's called a seagull. This sort of island of some description there, protecting the turn there, but then the vehicle coming out would have some sort of acceleration lane to a degree and then enter the traffic. Now, I like the fact, and Madge can have a prize for this, for the fact of identifying that the angle of crash there has been improved. So severity will be down in terms of that crash point. We've still got the same severity of crash pretty much at this location, but that one certainly would be reduced. Seagulls are an interesting intersection form for many reasons. There's always a challenge on merging from this side. So you've got a bad merge location, so your likelihood of crash is up a little bit, severity down there. You're still holding that one, and we get all sorts of different challenges. There's a really good tool available, Seagull intersection decision-making tool, essentially, from New Zealand. Shane Turner and others developed that, which you can plug in all your different variables, and it tells you your risk of a Seagull intersection. That's publicly available. You can just Google that, Seagull intersection decision-making tool. So an interesting idea there. And as Madge said, maybe as an interim something. Harris is keen on the idea of a raised platform, but a little bit skeptical that the Queensland political framework will allow that, and lots of work going on in that space to try to nudge people forward. But like the idea of thinking of it and rightly identifying that will reduce the severity of incidents. So prize on getting that clarity around the severity of incidents for Harris there. And we got lots and lots of other stuff. I'm not going to get to everybody's, I apologize. There was a couple of other things I wanted to point out that were through here. So there was some ideas of playing around with the service roads, which would reduce the likelihood of crashes. I think that's good. Like, there is a temptation to say, if we close these service roads off, that reduces the exposure to crashes. And this becomes an interesting one when you're doing safe system assessments, because I would, in almost every safe system assessment, say that that's actually just reducing the likelihood of crash. The reason for that is that we're kind of thinking about the whole intersection, and it doesn't, that's not a major influence on the 22,000 vehicles coming in here and the 2,500 coming out here. We still have all of that crash potential. It's not altering it in a major way. The only way that I would talk about that, closing those off as an exposure alteration, would be if I was doing some sort of really precise assessment technique, and I'd actually sort of gridded this out to a degree, and doing an assessment on each of these kind of grids. It's not something that's done in practice. I mean, theoretically you could do it, and then in that grid we would say, well, that influences exposure to, because we've removed that conflict point. It's not practically done. So I can see how people may have been confused by that. We do it at a more holistic level in a safe system assessment. So I hope that sort of clarifies a little bit of that. we've got some people venting their anger at the cost of infrastructure, which is amusing me. Adam Biggs could have a prize for making me chuckle there. So people wanting to look at lighting and do some assessments of those sort of things, they're going to influence the likelihood of crashes. Okay. I think I'm going to pause there on people's comments, but that was excellent. Sorry, I'm just reading one here. Okay, I think Justin gets a prize for his detailed one with costing and everything nicely laid out there in terms of showing us how to get some exposure reductions by utilizing underpass for pedestrians. That would remove exposure or lessen the exposure, less pedestrians crossing at grade. need to do a lot of investigation and think about a whole lot of things. But in the principle level, that's absolutely absolutely correct in that you would reduce exposure there. So Loretta, hopefully you tracked all my prize giving there. I apologize to some others who have put in some pretty good stuff I didn't give a prize to, but
all good. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Now I'm going to talk to some of the things that came up in this. I think there's some really interesting ideas, but I really like the way people are starting to think about these things. So those people, like there was a lot of people are saying signals. And I again just want to clarify, and I've used these little boxes down here with some ticks. Signals, we just think about the likelihood of crashes, okay? We know that putting signals in reduces the number of crashes by about 40 to 45%, okay? That's based on lots of traffic signals have gone in across the world, and there's been lots of studies before and after looking at crashes, and that data's collected. Now, every individual site will have nuances, of course, but as a generic crash reduction factor, or crash modification factor, crash reduction factor, we think we give it about somewhere in the order of 40 to 45% reduction in crashes. And it's because, you've got that clarity. But if you sort of go and analyze death and serious injury in any built up area, any city, in the sort of growth areas and areas with a bit of, speed, 60 kilometer per hour, 70 kilometer per hour, 80 kilometer per hour arterial roads. And I just heat mapped sort of out around the Springvale area just because I was looking at some other stuff there in terms of just filtered by death and serious injury and said, heat map where people are getting killed and seriously injured. And you can see there, I mean, that's a signalized intersection, signalized. Like, that's where we're seeing death and serious injury, signalized. And it's the same across Australia. Like, you pick any built up area and you'll see that the death and serious injury occurs there. Okay, exposure is high. Like, we've got vehicles, and we know the pedestrians are crossing, and we know that the cyclists are trying to get through there. And there's a lot going on at that location, a lot of conflict points and the like. So it makes sense, but it does get you wondering, like, once you've got your signals and you've got your fully controlled right turns and you've chucked in a red light camera and you've got good lighting and you've got good signage and everything like that, what's left to do? And this is where we need to really rethink what we're doing with intersections across Australia, across a lot of the world, actually. Because people just go, well, people should stop running the red lights. And the reality is they do. They're just going to. There's going to be these mistakes. And we keep building new signalized intersections on 60, 70, 80 kilometer per hour roads and somehow expecting them to operate differently. And they don't. So, there's something fundamentally wrong with what we're doing there in our conventional signalized intersections. But it's lovely to see that so many of you were pushing that boundary to say, well, what can we do about the severity? Well, how can we alter the severity of crashes? And I love the fact that a lot of you were saying, could we afford a roundabout? How much would a roundabout cost? Because a roundabout's an interesting one in the sense of exposure, likelihood, and severity. So as you can see from my little thing down here, a roundabout's a severity reducing intersection control. Okay. it does have less conflict points, but we, in a safe system assessment, in sort of safe system, we just give it reduction in severity because we do see about the same number of crashes occurring. It's just they're so much less severe. We've converted some really harsh angle crashes to rear ends, to these sort of slower vehicle-to-vehicle crashes. So roundabouts have these sort of wonderful advantages. And when I was talking about crash reduction factors or crash modification factors, but crash reduction factor for a roundabout sits more in the 80, 85 range as compared to traffic signals, which is in the sort of 40, 45 range. So we get, huge increases in safety from a roundabout over a set of traffic signals when we're talking about environments where it's vehicle dominated. Okay, there's certainly challenges associated with vulnerable road users at roundabouts. There's lots we can do, and Max will talk to you in the next session about some of the really highly aligned safe system things that we can do for vulnerable road users. But in these sort of environments that are vehicle-to-vehicle dominated, roundabouts are an exceptional safety tool because of that severity reduction technique. That's sort of road safety engineering 101 a little bit. Yeah. Now, the example we had there, we probably couldn't afford a roundabout due to the fact that we would need to be quite large. You'd have to acquire lots of those houses, huge, move services and things. The idea is that you need to get this B double, to be able to make its turn, and it needs this big area or make a big sweeping, turn like that. It needs to be really quite large. Now, in other areas, different road environment, we've got these sort of very small roundabouts. This is in the UK, what we call a mini roundabout. This is another advantage of roundabouts that, again, people aren't maybe just haven't clarified it in their mind, but everybody approaching a roundabout, all right, nobody approaching a roundabout thinks they have ultimate priority. Whereas if it's a set of traffic signals, one set of road users believes they have ultimate priority because they've got a green light. I mean, they do have priority, but they then continue at the speed and less alert. But if everybody coming up to here will be, slowing down, looking around, more alert, and we just have wonderful wins. I mean, this is sort of the UK's equivalent of the US four-way stop control. Like, get everybody to slow and stop and navigate through that area. They just have to put, paint a little circle in there to give it a little bit more ability to understand who goes first and those sorts of things. People get worried though about fast straight lines through these roundabouts and those sort of things. There's ability to put raised platforms, slowing vehicles coming through and the like as well. I'm going to give you a stretch break in a few minutes. I just cover off a couple more things. There is something I want to dig out of my archives to show you as well as I do that. But just roundabouts versus signals, 101 again, like the crash types that can occur at a roundabout and the number of conflict points are less, and they are better crashes for vehicle to vehicle. Set of traffic signals leaves us a lot of crashes, and you can see the red, some of them are very harsh angle crashes. So that's one of the reasons we see this big safety benefit of roundabouts and not as big for traffic signals. Crash vectors are far better at a set of traffic signals, at a roundabout, you're sort of bouncing off more when vehicles crash. And this last one, a bit connected to where I was showing that mini roundabout, like drivers will continue straight through at speed at traffic signals. Sometimes they will run a red light at the speed. Sometimes they'll enter accidentally through a red light, sometimes slowly, and other vehicles just going at speed. But when you've got that roundabout, the physical infrastructure there, or that control as you're approaching, they wake up. They come back to it. They engage with the driving task. They slow down. They look around. We're just having huge wins in road safety. So lots of benefit there. Now, I might take a pause while we've got our yawning man on the screen to give you an ability to have a stretch, and I'll check if we've got any questions. But I'm going to give you 3 minutes and 45 seconds. We'll get back into it. I just want to tell you a little story. I told this to some previous groups. I was working in Vic Roads in the road safety department quite a while back now, and there was a really big congestion easing program that had been announced and was under development. And basically it was, all of these growth areas and people trying to get driving through these areas, and they wanted to ease the congestion. And so the traffic engineers got out and came up with, looking at different traffic models, and identified like lots of the roundabouts were saturated during a couple of hours in the day. So they modeled removing lots of these roundabouts and creating traffic signals instead, and changing the traffic signals. And I was in the road safety department, and the projects were coming through road safety department for review, and we would review them, and we then we created a memo that we placed back on these reports, and I kept a copy of that memo, or a blank template of it. So hopefully you can see that on the screen, Lorena.
Yep, we can.
Okay, so blah, blah, blah. Okay, the road safety department has analysed this project as increasing crashes as follows. Project life, 20 years, so you need to give it a life of a project. That's number of deaths attributed to this project, 2.3. We put a little people there just to remind them what we were dealing with here. Number of serious injury attributed to this project, 12.6. Statement of acceptance. The above road trauma is accepted by, they were regional managers back then. I think they're directors now or something like that. So we pop that on and send it back. Now, you can imagine we were not, people did not like this, and we were told to stop doing this by our executive director, and got the stern talking to about, the responsibility of a road authority is very complex, and we're balancing lots of different, heating demands here, and easing congestion does, really good things for people's lives, and blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, okay, we know that, but you just got to sometimes boil things down to this and say, okay, if you're saying that getting, these extra minutes is worth these much death and serious injury to our community, sign it off and carry on. But people don't do that. Now, the reason I bring this up in the Safe System Assessment course is that you don't need to be this combative anymore, I suppose, because a Safe System Assessment essentially does this in a much more palatable way, I suppose. So yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd show you that. Now, we do have a hand up. I'm not sure if that's somebody who wants to talk, or if it's an accidental one, I'm going to. I'll see if Ryan wants to say something, or if it was an accidental one. Ryan, if you want to talk, you just unmute yourself and say hi. Otherwise, we'll carry on.
It was an accident. Sorry, Ken.
No, that's all right. Good to talk to you anyway.
Thanks.
Okay. Good. Yes, it did go down like a lead balloon. And yes, we never got one signed, obviously, and we were told to, not do that again, which we didn't. But I still got very frustrated. But they were expecting us to simply review things like the signal phasing, are the pedestrian crossings on desire lines? Do we need, more? Have they got the right, mast arms? Do we need it fully controlled or not? And those sort of things, which we did. But, of course, there's a bit more to it. But back to roundabouts. Single lane roundabouts, double lane roundabouts, turbo roundabouts. This is a little bit just for interest to you, but also I can link it a little bit back to a safe system assessing, but double lane roundabouts. So the more sort of lanes you put on a roundabout, the less it performs in terms of safety generally. So that one we were looking at, 2-lane roundabouts, is going to start to be a little bit worse. But the radius of the roundabout becomes important in these multi-lane scenarios. This is speed, radius, single lane, double lane. So you can see like a small radius double lane roundabout's not going to perform very well at all. Turbo roundabouts, for those who don't know them, are 2-lane roundabouts. They pretty much perform as single lane roundabouts. I'll show you a turbo. Here's a turbo roundabout out of the Netherlands. You can see it's got a raised concrete splitter island, essentially, between, or separator. It's got a raised concrete separator within the circulating carriageway, and another one on exit. So you essentially channelize the roundabout. And so, if a vehicle wants to go right, they've got to get into their channelized area, and they come around and they exit like that. Now, the advantage of that is it eliminates straight lining, or like people, you can't straight line through these multi-lanes. You get far better lane discipline. It's not, we in Australia, we use Alberta line marking of roundabouts, multi-lane roundabouts, which is essentially what this is. They just actually concrete it. Now, it gets a little bit problematic with some of the size of our vehicles that we've got an ability to do that. I like the sort of theory on it. I like this picture of a turbo for, it's a nice one. It's a very European radial roundabout. You can see they're sort of straight in, and the turn this, Australia is very much does a sort of tangential way that we would enter, slightly, But I love this. Look at the angle of this. So we've got, a vehicle coming out here, okay, making a mistake. We've got this white van coming in, and like we know that van's going to be going slow because it's come through this. And we know if it did hit this, the angle of that crash is going to be not severe at all. So it's sort of just showing some advantages of roundabouts just in that one aerial image. If this was a set of traffic signals and this truck had pulled out in front of the vehicle, it would have been traveling at, whatever free flow operating speed it was traveling at, and we'd have a serious incident. Yes, the Dutch, they love their turbo roundabouts. I was talking to a Dutch engineer that we'd bought out. We were doing bicycle safety at roundabout, and so different designs of that. And I just happened to pop this up on the screen and said, yeah, this is amazing. I haven't driven it, but I'm like, it's amazing. And I say, in Australia, like roads of that volume and the like would, it'd likely be a big signalized intersection. Probably vehicles traveling through at 60 or 70 kilometers per hour. It might at some point get to grade separation, but it's probably likely to be a large signalized intersection. And the Dutch engineer is just like, but what about all the death and serious injury to your community? I'm like, yeah, I know. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And so it was just, it could not fathom that you would possibly run a large signalized cross intersection at those speeds and volumes. I mean, it couldn't fathom it. This sort of thing is far more palatable. Now, this is signalized as well, so it just slows people through and channelizes, and of course, you see right down the bottom of the screen here, no possible way you're going to send a bike through anything like that. You're going to have fully grade separated bike facilities and the like. Anyway, there's good work now to say, well, okay, we know these large signalized intersections don't operate as safely as we would like. And what can we do to try and grab some of the safe system principles and integrate them into large signalized intersections? We know we've got traffic priority routes. We know that they have a lot of traffic, and we've got to move the traffic through. It's the real world, okay? But at these higher risk points, at these conflict points, are there things we can do to lessen the speed, alter the angle, wake people up through geometric changes through intersection form? These are, this is cut through roundabout. It's a concept. Okay, this one hasn't been built, but I like the fact that people are trying to, say, what could we gather? This is so the idea, that a vehicle coming up here is going to be alerted. They're going to be very looking around, slowing down. We'll get some better angles on some of the crashes, and we're getting lower speeds through there. So those sort of things are interesting. I actually don't think it'd be anywhere near as complex as it looks once you're on the ground and driving it, but really did like the fact that now we have quite a few people talking about raised safety platforms. Adam's talking about driver comprehension of some of those other intersection forms. You do need to consider that, are we increasing the likelihood of crashes due to it being highly complex? A little bit of complexity, not the worst thing sometimes at intersections to activate people, but it is a balance, and you've got to keep that into account, take that into account. Love the fact that raised safety platforms were being brought up for that, the example, a little exercise we were doing. I like that on a number of reasons. One is when I started my career in a road authority, that scenario that I gave you, if I said, oh, why don't we raise that road, do some raised platforms on that road with 22,000 vehicles a day and 11% commercial vehicles be double route, well, I would have been just, laughed at or kicked out of the room or told to sit in the corner and think about what I just said. But we've evolved significantly from that point. And we understand that you can do vertical deflection on those sorts of roads. You can do, it's not like an urban speed hump. You're creating shallower grade raised platforms with the idea to bring vehicle speeds down to reasonable, safe system speeds. So that's what was proposed at that intersection you were looking at. And yeah, so a lot of you were sort of on that. Now, this is artistic impression, so don't get fixated on particular specifics. But the idea is that a vehicle coming in here is getting slowed down. The bullet vehicle is getting slowed down. So the bullet vehicle is getting slowed down. The target vehicles, which are the ones exiting or entering, well, you don't need to slow them down. This is because it's a T intersection, right? They're not the ones that are going to do the damage. So getting these vehicles down. Now, you work your ramp grades to get desirable speeds of vehicles. Now, what do you think? Like this one, they were particularly concerned, and what they decided is vehicle-to-vehicle crashes coming out of here at that right angle was what they're predominantly trying to get under that threshold. So what speed do you think they were trying to get that ramp to, get vehicles going over that ramp at a comfortable ramp pace? So Adam gets the prize for it. It was 50. So Rick's right. If they were working for the pedestrian threshold, then it would be down to 30. But for the right angle vehicle to vehicle, they opted on the 30. Now, this is where we get into sort of these real world project balance challenges. Like that's an arterial road operating at 70 with 22,000 vehicles a day. Okay, 30 would be great because they've got pedestrians crossing down there. They're yeah. Maybe at some point in the future, we might be able to have got ourselves into a position where that's somewhat more palatable. But the 50 was sort of where they were able to push the boundary to in dampening that down. So understand why the 30 came up there from that theoretical perspective, and they were just focused on that one. Now they also knew there was actually low pedestrian activity in the area and a few other bits and pieces. But you can see here that signalizing, we still get our likelihood reduction, but the presence of these raised platforms starts to now reduce the severity of crashes. And so that one was built. It was built there, advisory speeds of 50, vehicles slowing down. In the PDFs, I don't know if I mentioned this last session, if you download the PDFs out of Learning Management System, these little things hyperlink out to some more information about these different things. So you can jump on and click on those and get a little bit of a Safe System snippet on the topic. If you're on LinkedIn, it's worth following Safe System Solutions because we put out usually 3 Safe System snippets a week. Like we take a little topic and we explain it a little bit, usually a video or some photos to go with it. We've got lots on raised safety platforms and their design, dealing with things like drainage, with noise, with heavy vehicle stability, placement of them, all of the practical design sort of challenges. So this one was one of the first ones on a sort of major arterial like this. There are lots of them now in Victoria. There's about 15 major or decent sized intersections with raised safety platforms and signalized. New Zealand's rolling them out. Not too many other states are putting them in yet, but there's lots of people looking at how it could be done. I was with a colleague out there doing the post-opening road safety audit of this and took this photo. I really love this photo in the sense that we've got a vehicle approaching a green light and they're slowing down. And my traffic ops friends do not like this picture. They go, oh, it's so inefficient. Like we've got, there's hundreds of thousands of vehicles that go through there and they'd go through without an incident. We're slowing all of them down on this, very slim, very tiny chance that something could happen. And I'm like, well, that's like ridiculous. I mean, if we had put a roundabout in there, everybody would slow down and nobody would be complaining. It's just, this is different, something that isn't usually done. So I didn't quite buy that argument from that perspective. The other interesting thing, and there's been now enough of these have gone out and there's been enough research reports and evaluations and things sort of pulled together. They get a good reduction in death and serious injury for vehicle-to-vehicle crashes. They actually get some wonderful reductions for pedestrians and cyclists as well. Even though they're not quite into the within that safe system tolerance, we still get big benefit in terms of reduction in likelihood of crashes, and some of the severity as well for vulnerable road users. The dilemma zone is reduced. The dilemma zone, which for those who don't know that concept, it's the point in time and space where a vehicle is in a dilemma when they see the amber light as to whether to stop or to go through. I'm sure you've been in the dilemma zone at one point. Basically, the presence of the Race Safety platform just pulls that in, and people actually brake. Now, we've got a few questions and hands up, it looks like, don't we?
We do. Yeah, I might just read out a question first. It was a little bit earlier. Has there been community road user feedback?
Yeah, so like any change you ever make on the road network, people, before you make it, go nuts, thinking that the world's going to end. When you do it, they grumble for a while, and then they accept that's the normal. So yes, people were very angry at this idea and didn't want it. And once it went in, there was some grumbling and feedback because it was different. And now the community, when survey, like it's just part of what is there. They're not fazed by it. Now, Justin, you've got your hand up and we've unmuted yourself.
Oh yeah, I was just wondering, you see how you've got that perspective of the image there. If you were to paint longer, like lines approaching towards it, like warning lines or something like that, that created like some sort of visual distraction.
Yeah, like zigzags or something.
Yeah. Would that help with reducing the slowdown into that zone?
Yeah, I think there's more that can be done to further enhance that. I think that's a good idea. You can use different perceptual countermeasures, like so dragon's teeth or peripheral transverse lines and these sorts of things on these approaches. If it's well signed, like the ones that exist well signed and you've got good piano key marking, they do stand out reasonably well, and people do reduce their speed. But I think it's a decent idea to continue to look at what we can do to enhance that. Good, thanks. Okay, so the interesting, the amount of things people thought like were going to happen that you could never put one of these in because of, and I'll just list a few, like they said, well, it's a bus route, like the passengers on the bus are just going to get thrown off and break hips, and they go, it's a heavy vehicle route, it's going to be all the freight will be broken. They said the noise will be unbearable for residents. People are going to hit this and they're like, dukes of hazard fly off into the roadsides. The water pooling will, the whole area will flood. Like the list just went on, and the reality is that none of that has played out in the like 15 or so of these that have gone in, and they've been on some pretty big routes. Like this one is Dalton Childs Road. I mean, that carries 55,000 vehicles a day, major bus route, emergency services route. That was another one. They're like, oh, yeah, this is going to slow all the emergency services down. And you're like, well, it's I mean, they slow down to go through a signalized intersection anyway. So we're really not doing that. And it's, so that, yeah. There's a lot of fear with anything new. And I think now we've done enough of these that we've put a lot of that to bed. Just another question?
Yeah, I've got an intersection that I've got to implement, and I'm thinking this would be a really great treatment for it. But it's on Ballarat Road in Braybrook.
Yeah.
and I don't know, the traffic volumes would that kind of be suitable for it maybe, or?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes. The answer is yes. It is suitable for it. We've got a lot of big roads in especially in that northwest of Victoria, where there's quite a few of these have gone out there. There are, you've got to be specific with some of the design of it. Like, these are somewhat shallow. You don't want, like, you've got to get the grades right. But yeah, like that, the general idea is that, yeah, if you're driving Ballarat Road, when you cross another major road, or you should be slowing down, because crashes will happen, even if we signalize it. So yeah, I think it's very much one that should be, further investigated. And my preference is to say, yes, it should be a roundabout, a signalized roundabout, raised safety platform, and you prove to us why it's not that, rather than us road safety practitioners having to prove that it is feasible. Like, we've got, like, when we talk about, safety first, but then just throw that out the window. And we do the same with fully controlled right turns often. It's insane. Well, Queensland doesn't. Queensland's got that worked out, I'm pretty sure. Harris will probably correct me if I'm wrong. But like, yeah, a signalized intersection often goes in, and then if there's if crashes emerge, death and serious injury, then they'll put a fully controlled right turn. It's insane. You should start there, and then if it's absolutely proven to be safe, we'll back it off. Anyway, thank you, Justin. Good question. And we can send you lots of example designs of some of these other ones, and I'll point you shortly at some information on where you can get more reading around raised safety platforms and these sorts of intersections. So hopefully something that you might be able to explore. Okay. Yep. So one of the things that you can look at, Justin, but also others, is Road Design Note 307, which details some really good information about these sorts of raised platforms on major arterials. We'll put that into the learning management system in the resource folder, which Loretta showed you yesterday. There's also an Austroads document, the effectiveness and implementation of raised safety platforms. And this goes and gives, a lot of good information as well. So that's worth a read, especially if you're trying to deal with some of those big areas. Loretta, now I've got a bit more. So we're gonna have to talk them through their assignment. I've got a little bit more content to cover, and I think there might be a couple of questions, maybe.
Comments, some good interaction in the chat. I think Anthony made some reference to certain structures used in Dubai a lot, because the roads are very long and straight, and many drivers, including myself, get tired by driving along this.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about some of the mid-block, so audio tactile, edge line, haptic feedback devices, and the like. Sometimes we can use different features on the approach to intersections to activate a bit more interaction, like rumble strips across the lane and different things to try and lessen the likelihood of crash. But we really want to be making sure we are starting to think more and more about the severity of incident, even if we've reduced the chance of it happening. I just wanted to throw this one in there. We were talking about the size of roundabouts. I think this is an interesting example here where, again, a safe system assessment really assisted. Oh, actually, I just want to say something. I'm going to go back. This intersection it's pretty exciting for me in the sense that it used to be a roundabout, Dalton Charles. It was saturated during a few hours in the day due to congestion, and there was a big congestion easing program. This is all sounding very familiar, isn't it? And the plan was to rip it out and put in traffic signals. Okay. A safe system assessment was done as part of this. I wasn't involved in that safe system assessment, but the safe system assessment did essentially what that memo that I was producing, or we were producing back in the day, same, and then recommended raising the intersection to get vehicle speeds down through this conflict point, and they took it on. So it's kind of wonderful to see that sort of evolution of our industry to understand that. Yeah, so this one, again, it was a site and they were looking what could be done, and looked at the idea of a roundabout. And then the roundabout just became super expensive because of this telecommunication exchange building, the fact that big land acquisition was going to be required for the reverse curves coming in, whole lot of service removal, a whole lot of challenges. And then they went to just some right turn bays at now. A safe system assessment again was done there, pushed back on that because it still leaves bullet vehicle speeds high, and the energy pretty high in the system, and sort of suggested, further investigation of even smaller roundabouts to try to bring vehicle speeds down and other things. So then they went to a smaller roundabout. This is sort of the evolution of compact roundabouts, which are, the roundabout itself is that tiny little squiggle in the middle there, little circle in the middle. The rest of that is a concrete apron, and that's the way you're able to get your larger vehicle to track around there, because it's gonna take up lots of that space. Sorry, I went way off course there. It's got some raised platforms again, shallow raised platforms to slow vehicles because reverse curves are not there. Reverse curves on the approach to a roundabout to try and slow vehicles as they approach. But again, that one got built. And I think it's another good example of where the safe system assessment process and the thinking about energy at the conflict points and saying, reducing the likelihood is not enough. We actually fundamentally have to start to now get ourselves in the point where we're addressing severity as well. I think we've got a little poll potentially, Loretta, that may pop up. Again, you're not being marked on this, everyone. It's just something to consolidate our thinking. And then I'll just do another sort of 10 minutes of discussions there. If it may have popped up on your screen, or it may not have. It says true or false, traffic signals are not safe system. True, false, or unintelligible question, which means that doesn't make sense what you're asking. It's basically you're saying stupid question, Ken. True, false, or unintelligible question there. I'll give it another 10 seconds and then I'm going to keep moving on because I've got to give time to explain. Five, four, three, two, one, and let's end that. And we'll share the results. So we've got a bit of a mix there. Unintelligible questions are pretty good one because, again, if you know context, it's not this like you haven't been told enough about that. The other part of why it's kind of an unintelligible question is we don't really talk about safe system as some binary concept. Like you'll notice that in my language, I will always talk about the alignment with safe system principles. That's highly aligned with safe system principles, or that's not so well aligned, because it's kind of a like pure safe system and pure not safe system is it's a bit of a weird ideas and concepts. But, if you did say false, I'll, can accept that, because you were probably saying, well, it's not the signals that have any, like, it's the context of it. Like, so don't blame the signals. And if you said true, perhaps you had that particular context in mind of high speed environments. But one of the things I did want to make sure was that people don't want to leave this course saying, well, we can never do traffic signals again. That's not the that's not what we're on about. It's just the safe system principles of people are going to make mistakes. So we're going to have people running red lights, and we're going to have, these incidents, and we need to address the severity of these incidents. So if those signals are going to be in environments where they're operating at high speed, we need to do stuff to bring speeds down through those conflict points. And those are in your notes if you want just a summary of the key points. Okay, so lane departure crashes. Well, we focused a lot on intersection. A lot of the same principles sort of that we can think about: exposure, likelihood, severity. Exposure is going to be the number of vehicles going through a mid-block area and potentially departing their lane. The likelihood will be all sorts of things like the audio tactile edge line, presence of sealed shoulders, the delineation, so the signs, the lighting, the surface texture, all sorts of things like that. And the severity will be predominantly associated with the speed, the roadside hazard makeup, whether there's barriers present or not. So, yeah, we've got a lot of road network across Australia, but across the world, which is these high-speed roads separated by a centre line with some sealed shoulders potentially, and a little bit of cleared area into some trees, sometimes bigger cleared areas. A lot of straight roads, sometimes some windy roads, but a lot of straight road out there. Without knowing anything really about this road, I mean, what do you think are the crash types that would be occurring on this road? It goes on like this for about 400 kilometers, fairly pretty much straight the whole way. Anybody got any idea? Okay, so, yep. Head on and run off road. So let's give some people some prizes there. Mahesh already got a prize today. So Chris and Linda can have prizes there. That's right. We know. Head on and run off road. There's a point somewhere around the 6,000 vehicles a day where head-ons become a more dominant part as opposed to run off road. But yeah, you're going to get both. So we talked about the ANCAP speed. Now, remember, it has gone up from 29 now to 32 kilometers per hour. So that is a pretty low speed that we are talking about in terms of protection of side impact with trees, power poles, and the like. This, this is a real world crash, estimated at about 60 kilometers an hour. This is quite graphic, this. So, turn away if you need here. But I'm just trying to show the violence of these types of crashes. Like that, the energy transfer there, it is just unsurvivable. Like you can see how incredible, and that was estimated to be 60 kilometers per hour. It's huge. So we can clear out the roadside of fixed hazards, trees, power poles, and the like. That certainly can be helpful in terms of a number of things. But you can see here, like cleared areas, so clear zones, like you can extend this out, and we see a reduction in the run-off road casualty crashes per 100 million vehicle kilometers traveled, which goes down, but it sort of asymptotes itself out. It doesn't eliminate death and serious injury in run-off road crashes. And so clear zones in more recent times have been identified as something that are not necessarily a safe place to be. Vehicles go beyond clear zones. Vehicles roll over in cleared areas. Now, a question that's come in was around why that vehicle was going sideways. Well, I tell you why vehicles go sideways, and they actually go sideways a lot when they've left the road. A vehicle will start yawing. So very common crash scenario on rural roads is a driver has fallen asleep or is being distracted by something, and they drift off the road. Then they wake up. They've gone into the unsealed shoulder or they've left the sealed shoulder. They wake up. And their instinct is to get back on the road, as it would be if you're traveling 100, 110 kilometers an hour and you're in a roadside, or you are going to yank that wheel back, and they do. But that action creates a yawing, which is the sideways slide of the vehicle. And then they're on a sideways slide. Then they'll go to recorrect that, and they'll start to, they overcorrect and they'll slide the other way. So a lot of people that start with a drift off end in these yawing crashes, we call them. Single yaws, double yaws, even triple yaws. And it exposes the side of the vehicle for significant portions of time to fixed hazards. So yeah, clearing the roadside of fixed hazards, it does in the first 4 to 5 meters, it really reduces, crashes down about 50%, and it just flattens out after that. But the reality is, it is very, very hard to ever be able to clear that. We don't want to be cutting down all the beautiful vegetation and all that wonderful stuff. Often you can't. It can be super expensive to move power poles, underground power, and these sorts of things. So we're in a real challenge there. And even only a few years ago, Austroad's Guide to Road Design, if you followed it and you were doing a town bypass, it would be something like this. You'd have a clear zone of 9, 11 meters or whatever it was out. You'd have a big wide median. You probably wouldn't have these trees in there, but you'd have this big clear wide median, and you'd have some sealed shoulders. You probably wouldn't have truck rumble strips. They're a bit of a trial thing. And that's how it's being built. And it's just absolutely tragic to see some of those billion-dollar road investments of duplication and town bypasses and billions of dollars, and then they open it up, and within months, a vehicle just goes across, kills a whole family. In the you're like, my God, how is that possible? That we imagine building a rail line and then within months 5 people are killed. The rail would be stopped until whatever residual risk was there. Anyway, I better move on because I need a bit of time here. The new Austroad's Guide to Road Safety Part 6 does a better job of this. We're getting in better positions. We're more understanding how we create safe system road environments for new roads, and how we can be further retrofitting the huge expanse of existing road environment. That's a big challenge. There's a lot of road out there. But at a very simplistic level, continuous safety barriers. That is your high alignment with safe system principles if you want high speed. It's somebody once said it's like the bumper bowling of roads. And it's a decent description. We're just accepting they are going to fall asleep. Okay, we're going to try and stop them falling asleep, audio tactile edge line, rest stops, all sorts of things. They're still going to fall asleep, some of them. So we've got to manage that crash. And then as you start to get into positions where you're unable to provide these, you've got to start to reduce speeds. And that's going to be a longer term prospect, and it's those roads can't operate. The energy is way too high, operating at 100, 110. And I've got some different cross sections in there, which I'm going to just jump through so we've got time to tell you what to do for your assignment. Of course, there's a lot in the detail of rollouts of continuous barrier systems and how you design it and providing areas for vehicles to pull over. And we learned a lot over time there. I won't get into that detail. I do want to highlight like this one, which is a Raptor cushion. And I think, again, not that I'm like advocating for this product specifically, but I do like the thinking that people are more and more thinking about managing the energy of crashes and what other things we could do. This was up in Mildura in regional Victoria. Old Ford there, left the road, 2 a.m., hit a power pole, a group of young males in it. Like, the scenario is so common, and we've got to, there's a lot of work to do in a whole lot of areas of the safe system to try and lessen that, everything from the vehicle and the, different restrictions and these sorts of things. But nonetheless, the crash occurred, hit the power pole. The power pole just happened to have a Raptor on it, which a Raptor is a cushioning device, which also is meant to sort of rotate a bit on impact, and so the energy is sort of pushed along a bit. This one, 4 young occupants hit it at an estimated 92 kilometers an hour. And they all came out of it with only minor injuries. I mean, that's astounding, like, considering we know that, hitting these things they're probably lucky they hit it frontal there. So they've got a lot of advantage out of that. And then the Raptor has been the one to make it likely not, serious and deaths involved. But I do just like that sort of, what else can we do to manage energy? Like, how can we lessen energy? How can we lessen the energy that gets transferred into the human? I think we'll skip that quiz. And because, Loretta, I'm hoping you've got the learning management system up and running, because I think we need to give this group an assignment.
I do have an assignment. You can see my screen there.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so hopefully you've gone in already and seen, the module 1, and you've done your quiz. So we're at module 2 today. So again, the presentation is in here, and of course, a lot of references that were made today are in here. But remembering also, there's some that were made that are in the resources section. But your tasks for module 2. So there is another quiz. So just like yesterday's quiz, clicking on it, and the quiz is currently not available. I'll fix that up just after this. I will fix it up. But more importantly, the assignment is there. I have tested that one. So the assignment for today, just clicking on it here. Now you need to click on the PDF to upload or download that, I should say. So clicking on the PDF and opening that file. So following through the assignment steps, so there's 4 steps you need to do. So filling out your name in here. Based on the assignment instructions, you do need to insert the link of the intersection that you select. So make sure you pop it in there so that we can actually look at that when we're grading your assignment. And hovering through the exposure, likelihood, and severity, which I'm sure Ken probably wants to add to this. So exactly as Loretta said there, pick an intersection. It can be the one outside the front of your house. It could be one you remember from your holiday. You don't actually need to attend the site for this one. Later assignment, we are going to send you to a close by site. Pick it, drop the Street View link in there, and then have a think about what is influencing the exposure to crashes at this intersection.
So between 1 and 3 factors there. Don't give us more than 3. Just what is influencing that? And you remember, exposure is about the volume. So the volume or the number. The volume of vehicles going through the area, the number of pedestrians crossing, the number of cyclists going through the area. Number. Think of exposure as number. So give us a few of those. Then the likelihood of crashes. You're going to give us between 1 and 3 of those. Now, remember, likelihood will be things like sight distances, how obvious is the intersection on approach, what's its control? Is it give way? Is it signalized? Surface conditions, lighting, all of those things. What's influencing that? And then severity. And you're going to think about what's influencing the severity of crashes. And there's only a small handful of things that are really going to influence severity of crashes: the speed, the angles, the vulnerability of the users, the presence of roadside hazards and point source hazards like poles and the like. So you pop in some severity things. Then we only want one change, just one thing that you could change that would influence the exposure to crashes. So something that could influence the exposure. Then it can be something different that would influence the likelihood, and then something different that could influence the severity. So something that you could change. Now, don't get too fixated on whether it would be palatable or not, or how much it would cost, or these sort of things. This assignment is to test your understanding of exposure and likelihood and severity. Okay? And you just need to prove that to us. So it can be done quite quickly. Dot points. Prove to us you understand what things in the road environment are influencing exposure, are influencing likelihood, are influencing severity. And then submit that. And
make sure you save it.
Save
it first.
And
then you do need to click on the add submission here. So once you're in there, clicking on there, you can drag it in from your folders, or you can upload it yourself and save changes. So remembering again, there is a pass mark of 80% required to successfully complete the assignment. You get up to 3 attempts. And if you have any questions, as always, contact us. I've fixed the quiz, so it should be available now. I'll just go back a step.
Okay, well, while we're having a look at that, there's the quiz.
There we are. And it's there for you to attempt. It's nice and easy.
Quiz is ready to go. So you've got a quiz. And then you've got this assignment, which really shouldn't take you long. And we'd love you to get, that assignment moved along for next session. So ideally jump onto it today. Max will probably have a bit of discussion with somebody who volunteers to talk through their site, but get it in, knock it off. And I think that's pretty much it. Of course, if you've got any questions, email training@safesystemsolutions.com.au. Great input today. Wonderful interaction, discussion. Gave out a few prizes. We'll give out a few more before next session. You're with Max tomorrow and Thursday.
Max and Marissa will be there in the background as well.
Yeah, so they'll do some trivia just before we kick things off. Knock off that assignment and that quiz and get yourself all prepared. Later in the week, we give you a bigger assignment. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye.